Welcome back to the Crochet Crowd. So it's my friends at yarnspirations.com. Today's the anatomy of half double crochet in the rounds, because the half double crochet is the most things that people will screw up on because they do not understand the anatomy, and for me it's taken me decades to learn actually what I'm looking at when it comes to doing half double crochet in the rounds, because I always end up with the wrong stitch count and I'm realizing that I'm not identifying the stitches properly. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just do this complete round, and then I'll be back in a moment and we'll talk about the anatomy, and I'm gonna show you some tips and tricks of what you need to do in order to do half double crochet in the round. Welcome to my channel, and I'm here to inspire you, give you crochet advice, and help you along with your next project. If you enjoyed this pattern, please give me a thumbs up or even comment so I can gauge your interest. It helps me to know what to film next. So lesson number one is to know how you're going to do the corner. So usually people screw up on a pattern when the chain two counts as a stitch. Always. That is the most biggest complaints when it comes to half double crochet, and even for myself I will always screw up if chain two is a half double crochet. So what you can do, I'm just gonna start with fresh yarn so we can talk about the anatomy of the stitch. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to join it and I'm gonna go into the corner. Okay, and instead of chaining two and it counting as a stitch, I'm just going to join it and I'm only gonna chain one. So this is not gonna count as anything. This is just a builder, and in the same corner space I want to apply a half double crochet. Yes, it bulks out the stitch a little bit, but this top of the stitch is a lot easier to see than assuming that you're gonna go into a chain. So that's something that I will always keep my stitch counts proper. Now the question is, where exactly do you start when you're doing a corner? So let me just pull this out and let me talk to you about the anatomy of the stitch. Now that you're zoomed in, we have to talk about where the stitch top really is. Is it here or here? So this is before the corner. So is it here or here? Is it, okay, so can you put a comment? Is it gonna be it's before or after the post? Before or after? You can leave me a comment. If you said it can be either or, you're correct. Can it be both? No. Can it be before? Yes. Can it be after? Yes. But it can never be both. Here's the thing, is that sometimes you see in stitch work that some of the designers will stick their hook after the post as counting as that stitch or before. In the Crochet Crowd it's always before. So this is technically the last stitch before the corner. So let me put a little strand through there just to show you. So this is the last stitch before the corner. So if you add another one here when you've already gone here, you will have increased your stitch count by one accidentally without going into the corner. So if I determine that I'm going to be before the stitch, the problem is that most people when they come out of a corner they literally jump to this space here because it's more open. But if you go before the post, that means that the first stitch out of a corner has to be before this post. So it has to be right here. Noticing that I'm not in a space, I'm actually in the top of the stitch. And where people mess up the most is that they literally will go into the corner, and because it buries it in, you don't ever see that. So people don't think to move that stuff out of the way. So this is the stitch, and I'm just gonna pull that strand through, and this is the next stitch on the after the corner. And right in between here is the actual corner itself. If you are a person that prefers to go after the post, which you can do, what you have to consider if you're gonna do that is that you were gonna go into the top here after this post. So let me just pull the stitch through. And so where would you go after you turn the corner if you have to go after? This is your first post, so your first stitch out from the corner would be here. So where people will screw up the most is that they will come into the stitch after this post, which is correct, but then what they'll do is they'll start in the stitch right here. That's before that post. And so what you've just done by doing that is that this will have created an extra stitch by going into this top of the stitch here on this side, because people will naturally go to the stitch next. Hopefully that's making sense, right? You can let me know in the comments. So what's gonna happen is that you would end up with, instead of 2 stitches, you'll end up with an extra one, and so you'll find that your stitch counts will always be wrong. So I find when I do shawl work that I try to avoid the half double crochet on any kind of points, and when I see those in crochet patterns I tend to ignore those as projects to actually film, because this is where people will leave the most comments, because they'll start gaining stitches. So let me actually demonstrate in stitch format how this is done. So as I'm coming across, I always favor the space before the post. Okay, so I'm gonna come across. So if you've ever watched my tutorials, that's where my side stops and that's where I begin my corner. So in this particular corner is just 1 half double crochet, chain 2 and 1 half double crochet. And this is where people will screw up. People will literally automatically jump to this stitch here as you're starting, which is technically incorrect, because I have been favoring the top of the stitch before the post. So this here, this is the post. I have to literally take the work and just shift it out of the way, and there is the top of this here. It's before the post, and that's where I need to half double crochet to start the side. So if I go here, I'm going to be missing the stitch and I will be short 1 stitch if I continue in the same manner, and I just gonna crochet as I normally would. So my stitch counts will always stay imbalanced if I can recognize that. So that would be what you would do, is if you favored the top of the stitch before the post. So let's frog this out and let me show you the other way. So if you are a person that likes to, and neither way is incorrect, so you gotta do, you just can't do both, you have to choose one or the other. So if I have it so that my half double crochets tops are after the post, which is right here, I can go into that spot, then I can do my corner, half double crochet, chain 2, half double crochet, and if what I'm saying is true, the first stitch will be right here, because this is the post and this is the space after this post. It technically looks a little nicer if you do that. But you can go either way. It's one of those ones, and you can decide what works for you. And this is the way to identify your corners if you're doing it right. And a lot of people, they literally will add an extra stitch every time and they don't even realize why they're doing it, because they're just misidentifying the top of the half double crochet stitch. So hopefully that helps.